All right, welcome back, everyone, for kind of the second installment. I think I made that up. I don't know. Second part of interviewing with Lyzeth. And so we are, just going through some questions, getting to know her. And so this second question I want to kind of learn more about, your experience being a first generation Mexican American here in Chicago, which, as I mentioned in the previous video, Chicago is a city made up of neighborhoods. Even me, who I'm not born and raised here, if you say what neighborhood you from, it can impact a lot of things when you're talking to people. So really just want to hear your experience around being Mexican American. And, also I think you mentioned that you have family that are still in Mexico, but just kind of hearing more about your experience on that.
Wow, that's such a loaded question. It's such a small question with so much.
Yeah, and also, I mean, don't feel free to break it down, because also, like, your parents are immigrants as well. Yeah. They came over in the late 70s, and so how has this experience been? How have you seen things through their eyes too?
It's been, when I think about my parents' sort of story and how I think it's impacted not just me, but I have siblings. I have an older brother and an older sister as well. And I think about sort of, and it's definitely kind of interlooped with like faith for me, a lot of it, because my parents got here, it was like November. And by January, my dad had a job, like a really good job.
Nice.
And it was one of those things where it's pretty unheard of for someone who doesn't speak the language, has very limited educational background. And, he was a mechanic out there, and that's what he worked. He was a maintenance mechanic at a factory out here. And that sort of set the course of my parents' sort of journey here. Because my dad ended up being with that company for 20 plus years. And that afforded my parents, the ability to, buy their own home, and have that, in the early 90s is when they finally were able to buy their own home. And it's the home that they still live in, and things like that. But definitely seeing my father, his work ethic, like, it astounds me to this day. Rarely missed a day of work. Like, he had to be really sick to miss a day of work. Like, that was just point blank. And, and to just see that from him. And then, my mom, she was a stay-at-home mom for some periods, but she also worked, in other times. And to see that work ethic from my parents, in order to for us to just have a better chance at life, whatever that meant and wherever that took us, they prepared the way, and it was for us to really just, either we take the reins or we don't, and it'd be interesting one day, to be able to bring in my brother and my sister into this conversation, because I'd love to hear what their thoughts are, because I can only speak from my experience and what I see. But for me, the impact that had on me really just pushed me in school. Like I was definitely the kid that wanted to get all A's, and and I'll get some B's. Like, I don't mind. I didn't like the C's. I didn't like anything else than that. And it definitely, made me want to be the best in everything. Like, I had to do everything I could to ensure, whether I consciously did it or not. Like, I wanted to make sure that their sacrifices, them leaving now as an adult, seeing they left everything. Like, they came here with the clothes on their backs, and that's it. Like, that was it. That's all they came with the hopes that maybe they'd have a better opportunity. There was no guarantee around that. And as an adult, to look back and see that and understand it now, because I probably didn't understand it or appreciate it as much as I do now. I had a sense of appreciation growing up, but to see that and it just pushes you very differently, and it makes you want to get to the top, and makes you want to just strive for something better, and it really just makes you realize, like, whatever sacrifices you think you're making, it doesn't compare to what your parents did, right? Like, it's just not, it's never going to be any better than what they did, or any more of a sacrifice that they made, because like I said, my mom has no family here. Like, the family that we do have, it's on my dad's side. So my mom, she, you know, they had to forego being able to go back and forth to Mexico. They couldn't travel that easily back and forth, and it wasn't something that was afforded to them, and it was just like, so I think that part of being Mexican American definitely is something that stays in the forefront, especially now, more than ever. Even if you think about where we are as a country, as a nation right now, it definitely stays in the forefront, and you understand the passion of a lot of, Mexican American and other Latin American countries, and people that live here, who may not be Mexican, if they're, from like other countries, and seeing that, understanding that sense of like, hey, people we made a choice to come here, but it wasn't an easy choice, and it wasn't an easy decision. It wasn't because we just wanted to, or for fun to come out here. There was a reason and a purpose for it. So I think that definitely has impact and shaped it. And I think, even, I know in the last video I talked about growing up in a bubble, and you mentioned, Chicago being a city of neighborhoods. And I think that does kind of create that sense of a bubble, and you're sort of like, you understand your own neighborhood more than anything else. And sometimes you don't know more than that. Like I said, like, I was fortunate enough that through my church, our church had, like, our church organization, denomination, whatever, had other churches across the city, and even like in the burbs. So while I wasn't exposed to maybe a lot of the neighborhoods itself, I visited other churches, so I knew there was more to Illinois than just Chicago. Through that experience, and understanding that, and even visually seeing the difference of where a church may be in Joliet or in like West Chicago, it's very different like than it is going to a church that might be in the city, and just visually just very different, and understanding that and seeing that. But not everybody has that experience, right? Like, sometimes all is that your neighborhood, and where you see it from. And like I said, my church, for the longest time, probably until I was like maybe 19 or 20, was located in Little Village. And even seeing the difference driving from my neighborhood to Little Village, and just the difference of just visually what that is, and it was, and it's just such, it stays in your memories. Like, it just stays in your memories, and you realize, I realized I was an adult, like, the privilege I had growing up where I did, a little bit, and seeing like, okay, maybe I had some more resources. I had a park open to me, like, a few blocks from where I live, and not everybody has this huge, beautiful, open space that they can go and play in, and experience in other neighborhoods. And I think, like I said, like, our, the community that I grew up in became more Latino as the years went on. So there's definitely that sense of just a different community, and and not all of them are Mexican, even though everybody likes to just say we're all Mexican anyway. But we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
But I definitely think, like, and if anybody that's watching, if you grew up in Chicago, I'd love to hear your experience. If you have any comments, below about, do you agree that you can grow up in a bubble in Chicago? Because I definitely think, and seen it, and continue to see it. I mean, there's kids that don't that I come across, or just even adults that I come across who, like, you know, I didn't know anything outside of my neighborhood until I went to college, or I went to high school outside of my neighborhood and realized there's a whole other world out there that existed. And I think that also plays into me growing up here as, you know, a first generation immigrant. You try to toe the line a lot. You know, you try not to question too many things. You try not to, you know, because your parents, you know, they were afraid. Like my parents were afraid for many years to do certain things, or they lived their life in a very, I think most immigrants live their life in a very safe way, in a very, like, you know, hey, I'm just gonna go to work, come home, take care of my family. I can't get involved in the local PTA. I can't get involved in, you know, so much in, you know, in my kids, because I don't understand the language, you know. And I think that's another, you know, thing that I could definitely talk about, because, you know, growing up, like my parents couldn't help me with homework. It wasn't something, it came to a point, you're like, maybe with math, it can help a little bit. Well, when you talk about, you know, US history and, you know, English and like spelling and all these things, that wasn't something they can sit down with you and help you, because, you know, they don't know the language. You know, there's a lot more, I would say, programs for parents now to kind of get more involved, even if you're, you know, you're Spanish, if you're a Spanish speaking parent. I think there's a lot more opportunities now than maybe back then, and definitely more of that outreach to parents to get more engaged in their kids' schooling and things like that. So I think that also plays into that, growing up as a first generation, and having that. Like my nephew has a very different experience with his parents, and even with me, and you know, and my brother, and having us as resources to ensure that what we went through, he won't go through. Like, so his experience is going to be completely different. Like we're going to make sure he has every opportunity available to him. And even if, you know, you're an older, you know, sibling, who, you know, because like my brother is about 7 or 8 years older than me. So there's a lot of kids who have that, you know, so most of them will look out and be like, hey, I'll help you out, because what I went through, you shouldn't go through, you know. And I think there's that whole different level of, I think, just responsibility too, when it comes to it. You know, you want to make sure that what you know, your parents want to make sure that you have a better chance. You want to make sure the next generation has a better chance that you did. You want to make sure that happens. It's not true for all, you know, immigrant families, but I think that's been my experience, is just ensuring that that next generation has all the opportunities that, because I didn't know about, or nobody helped me get there, like they should have them, and whatever it takes, we'll make sure that they get it, you know. And so I think that also plays into that, sort of being that first generation individual, that, you know, growing up and being Mexican American in that. But yeah, I think that I would say that that's probably been my sort of in a short sense, my experience around that.
That was very well put together. That's very well said. And I feel like I threw a lot of questions, like a lot of sub questions at you.
I'm trying to remember it all.
But you did a wonderful job, really bringing everything full circle, from talking about your parents and them immigrating here to you growing up, to them, you know, still living in the house that they purchased in the 90s, and really talking about your nephew and how things will be different from him, which is definitely an advantage, obviously. Yeah. And so I really appreciate that. You did a really good job. And so as you also touch base, you know, anyone, please feel free to comment, whether you're an immigrant yourself or you're first, second generation. I know we got some first generation college students as well, myself being one of them. You know, you probably are like right behind your siblings, so you all are first generation together. So just really, you know, any comments or any questions you have for Lyzeth or myself, just, you know, please feel free to drop it, and don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. We'll be right back.